Welcome back, guys. This is Riders of the Dawn. This is Stu.
This is Jay.
This will be our first videoized Riders of the Dawn show. So if you're listening on SoundCloud, all of our shows are going up on YouTube, just the audio. But this will be the first one that has video and audio, so you can listen to it in either one. There's no special visuals other than our smiling faces.
Or our angry, dark, grim, and frostbitten faces.
Yes. Yeah. If you want to look at a couple of grim Vikings drive to an
drive to their
job.
day jobs.
Yeah. Did you could do that? Okay. So what are we doing today?
Today we're going to do the 10 best high fantasy authors.
Yeah, just 10 now it's hard to say. It's always hard to say best.
Right. Best is subjective,
Best
but
is-
we're here to tell you that our subjective reality is greater than anyone else's subjective
Yes.
reality.
And if you read my upcoming book, Water of Awakening, you'll see that we forge our own realities, and so I'm forging reality for you. That reality is these are the 10 best.
So in no particular order, because it's hard to put them in an order on the drive to work.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying greatest, by the way. It's just like no one can wear the mantle of greatest.
Yeah.
So these are just 10 that we think are important and good.
So number one, I think it's important to put him as number one. Tolkien.
Yeah. So Tolkien, the reason I think Tolkien should always be considered in a list is mainly influence. That's the first big reason.
Yeah.
Is that he influenced fantasy in a lot of different ways. Michael Moorcock will also be on the list. He often talked about how he's like, I'm the last fantasy author who really wasn't influenced by Tolkien. But what Tolkien kind of brought to the table was a really, 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 really well-developed world.
Yeah.
So Middle Earth is probably still the most lore-developed, I guess, fantasy universe that I can think of, with the possible exception of Malazan.
I was gonna say maybe Malazan, and he's
It's
on
the only
there
one
too.
that comes close, and the reason is because Tolkien really, really everything has a name.
Yeah.
And everything exists in a space and has a place in the world and a map. And there's history that goes back to before the creation of the world that continues all the way to the end of Lord of the Rings. So when you read Lord of the Rings, you get this feeling that you're walking through a very ancient world. And that was something my wife said about it. Everything has a name. So everything has a history. Everything has a meaning to it that... it changes the depth of the impact. It makes it feel much more real.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It feels like whenever you have, even if you just mention it in passing, this thing, which was this, and that's all you say about it. The fact that it
has a name.
It has a name really, really gives it depth that the reader imagines. You don't even have to talk about it. Of course, if you read the Silmarillion,
you get a
huge amount of history. So that's really cool. There's an entire book written about the world, about the setting, which
is just
really
like
cool.
the lore, Silmarillion's like the lore, and Lord of the Rings is really the story, or the one that they recently published, Children of Húrin, which I liked. By the way, there is a narration of it on YouTube that you can find, done by Christopher Lee.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool narration, so you can listen to it for free.
We could talk about Tolkien the whole trip.
And we probably should. But I think that's a big influence. He also really the idea of a completely alternate reality that encompasses the world. That's a big contribution to the genre.
And not only that, I got to talk about D&D, because even though there's no direct reflection of Tolkien in D&D, it's a huge influence.
Yeah, Gary Gygax was very, very influenced. And originally, in the original versions of D&D, the halfling was called a hobbit.
Yeah.
And because of some copyright issues, they changed it to halfling, which was more neutral. But
it's pretty well understood. It's pretty well understood.
Yeah, it's pretty understood. So, who's next on the list?
Who's next on the list?
Who's do someone newer. Steven Erikson, we mentioned him.
Steven Erikson. Okay, so Steven Erikson is famous for the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and he and Ian Esselmont wrote this story. It was originally a tabletop campaign. I'm not sure if it was Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I think it was GURPS.
Yeah,
it was a GURPS campaign.
And
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't remember if it's like GURPS specifically.
Yeah.
If it was like an adaptation of like MERP or something.
They developed it into this entire world that they wrote about. Now, Erickson wrote the main 10-book series associated with the world, which is the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Starts with Gardens of the Moon. You can get Gardens of the Moon really cheap, like we were talking about with series. And then to get an ebook of the Crippled God, I'm pretty sure it's
like $10.99.
It's like $10.99.
you know?
They really got that sales funnel down.
Yeah.
And Esselmont wrote 4 or 6 books that happen within the time frame of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but they're kind of interweaved.
Yeah,
or happening simultaneously to the events of
a different focus of the story events.
Yeah, with different characters, and there's a lot of character crossovers too, which is really cool. They have different writing styles, but they're similar enough that you don't feel like you don't get like world hangover, if that makes sense. So that's cool. I love Erickson's writing. It's really dense. I call it heavy lifting reading. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, the prose is really good, and that's something I probably should have mentioned about Tolkien. Tolkien's prose is amazing. He was a perfectionist when it came to like his use of language, and it shows. It's really, everything's really thought out. And with Erikson, you get the same feeling that like the prose is really, really well written. He draws images really, really well. It is kind of dense, but not in a way where you're going to have to be popping out your thesaurus.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really, really well used imagery. Rather than saying this was tall, he'll create an image for you of it being tall and massive that I think is really effective. I think probably a big reason why he's on the list is the massiveness of Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's tremendous, and there's no one viewpoint character.
Yeah, you never actually, and this I think has turned people off to the series, is there's no main character. There are lots of important characters. Lots of important viewpoint characters. And I would say that Fiddler is probably the closest thing you can get to a main character of the story. But even then, there's so many others. There's so many others that are equally as important.
And you know the epicness of the interactions there too. Like gods are characters in the book. It's really, really, really cool. And yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is that the universe is massive and the books are massive. There's a huge number of characters. I think the big criticism he gets is people are like, he should edit it down more. But if he edited it down more, that would take away from the world building, which is why you read him. So it's really like a sway kind of thing. If you edit down too much in certain fantasy, then you're cutting out both the character, because of the large number of characters. It takes a long time to develop.
Yeah, and I think what I like about Erickson's prose is that he uses situations that are happening in the book to make larger philosophical points, like about the nature of war,
the nature of the gods.
Yeah, the nature of ascendancy and power. And I remember there's sections of the book where I would just stop and reread something that like J.R.R. says in Dead House Gates, and I'm like, you could like Plato said this.
Yeah,
like, I'm pretty sure that.
Yeah, I love the first book opens up with one of my favorite quotes where you don't realize who the characters are when they're talking to each other at the beginning of Gardens of the Moon. because it's the beginning of the entire series, and it's just two characters, but they say important things, and you only learn who the character that's saying it is later only by understanding who that character was, which is Whiskey Jack.
Yeah.
He tells Parrot, he's like, if you want to live free, boy, live quietly. Or the freest life is the one that isn't noticed by the gods.
Yeah.
You want to live free, boy, live quietly.
Yeah.
And if you get the Kindle version, you'll see that there's like 10,000 people who highlighted that quote because it actually creates the tone for the entire series.
Yeah.
And all the way to the end. That's one of the themes, is that like these people can't live quietly, and as a result they're opposed to the gods, or being the gods are constantly trying to manipulate them.
Yeah. It's a really great series. If you guys haven't picked it up, I would say
it's not for noobs, but
it's one of the most important modern fantasy works today. It's that important.
Yeah, I think for sure. If you haven't at least tried it out, I think you're missing out.
Okay, who's next?
You pick.
Brandon Sanderson.
All right, we'll do Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon Sanderson is... Well, the first thing I noticed about Brandon Sanderson was... Well, I read Mistborn. Was the first thing that I read that he did. And I loved Mistborn because I thought the magic system was so cool.
Yeah, he created a magic system that had really, really defined limits and worked in really, really particular ways. And the result of that is that you have a constant understanding of characters' limitations and abilities to be killed and to fail. Magic is not a Deus Ex Machina thing at all in Brandon Sanderson's work. That's a common thread that goes through everything that he has with magic, is that things are well defined with their limitations, and it's more like recreating science. And that's the virtue, I think, of fantasy, is that you create different possibilities by rearranging the limitations.
And honestly, the way that he works magic has been hugely influential to current authors writing fantasy. That's a really big trend, is wanting your audience to understand magic more as a science than as like Gandalf, which is kind of like divine intervention.
Yeah, and this is a something worthy of noting with like Lord of the Rings, is that the characters who are capable of exercising magic are not the main characters. Right. So as a result, you have a different relationship with them as the reader. They're more mysterious, and so because magic is mysterious. But even Tolkien would say that the elves would say to the creatures, maybe it's magic to you, but to us it's just our art. Yeah. Which would be basically explaining that you don't really understand it, but it's not magic to us. It's an understanding of how the world works.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, you can see those threads carried forward. If you don't know who Brandon Sanderson is, you must be living under a rock.
Yeah, the guy is one of the most prolific writers today.
Yeah, he's like the Stephen King of fantasy.
Exactly what
when Stephen King is not writing fantasy.
Right. Yeah. Now, Stephen King he's not going to be on this list. He would definitely be on another list.
Yeah.
So the Mistborn, that was the first series I read through of Sanderson. Then I got hooked into Way of Kings, which is possibly my favorite fantasy book.
Yeah, I think Sanderson's best single book is Way of Kings.
It's so good.
And because I've read a bunch of his books, and they're all good. Like, he's a really good writer. He's very competent. His prose is good. It's functional. You don't ever have to bust out the thesaurus, but you always get an idea that there's a variety of language. He doesn't overuse color words. Robert Jordan. And so it's good. Like, he's a very technically proficient writer. And Way of Kings, he exercises the art of story writing in a really, really good way. Like, I knew what he was doing as he was doing it, but he was exercising it so well that it didn't really matter. It's kind of like listening to a really good symphony. You know how symphonies are arranged. You know that you have fast movement, slow, dance, fast. But when you hear it done well, that's what the meat of it is. Yeah,
I was gonna say that Brandon Sanderson writing The Way of Kings is like, it's like he's the Bach of fantasy writing right there. It's not that he innovated writing that book.
It's just he achieved a really high level.
Yeah, it's so good the way that he wrote it. if you understand plot, you can see exactly where he's going and what's going to happen.
Yeah, and if you want to get more into plot-based writing, that is charting out what you're going to do when you write, if you're a writer, then I think Sanderson's a really, really good author to read, because he's not what people call a pantser or gardener. He doesn't just like see what happens. He
plots
really, really specific. Everything happens for a really specific reason.
And part of that, and that's part of the reason he's so prolific, because if you're plotting everything out from start to finish, you're gonna have a much easier time pumping out those words.
Yeah, you're never gonna get to a point where you're like, I don't know what comes next. Of course you know what comes next, because you already determined it.
You already said what comes next.
Yeah, you already figured it out to begin with. So, yeah, definitely check out Brandon Sanderson. We could do another whole show on him. Yeah. Next.
Pick one of your guys.
Michael Moorcock. We already mentioned him. Let's do Michael Moorcock. So Michael Moorcock, as I mentioned, he will self-say that he's probably the last writer not influenced by Tolkien. Now, if you read a lot of his past quotes, he's very kind of anti-Tolkien. He's like, I don't like Tolkien's view of like merry old England and stuff like that. As time wears on, and I think part of that was him trying to create an identity separate from the Tolkienish kind of fantasy that's going on. He's less anti-Tolkien, and frankly, I think that's good, because you don't want to define yourself as not Tolkien. You want to define yourself as who you are. But anyway, Michael Moorcock wrote very famously the Elric series. He wrote the Eternal Champion sequence, and his big contribution is what Stephen King would end up doing, which is the idea of a multiverse. So the idea of a multiverse is that you have many different worlds that are interconnected in some specific way. And so the way that he does it is, there's like the Young Kingdoms, which is Elric's world. There's different versions of Europe, like if you read the Hawkmoon series, which I'm a fan of, it's Europe, but it's very different, and there's still like knights and stuff, and there's still magic and all kinds of cool things. And all of these are linked through the cosmic conflict between order and chaos. And order and chaos are waging war on all these different worlds that are interconnected. And you can even sail on the seas of fate and go between worlds, and go out of time, and go to the end of time, and all these different ideas to participate in this grand cosmic conflict. You'll have characters who ally themselves with chaos and then regret it, and are unable to control their fate once they do that. You'll have characters that desperately want to fight for order, but are unable to, and are being manipulated by the forces above. But the main thing is, all those different worlds he creates are interconnected in some particular way. If you read Sailor on the Seas of Fate, which is an Elric book, and it's actually a collection of 4 different Elric novellas turned into one novel, which destroys this idea of a 3-act structure. That's also kind of a cool reason to read Moorcock. His structure can be completely bonkers and off the wall and unexpected, and not what you want at all, which may be why he's not as popular as some other authors. But anyway, you read that, and there's an act where all his heroes from all his heroic fantasy books are working together, and they're all the same person. They're all the same person, but they don't remember it, because they're in different incarnations of the Eternal Champion. This like cosmic soul who's constantly being reincarnated to fight for either order or chaos. And one of the characters, he ends up being aligned with chaos, and the others, he's aligned with order. And so it's a very interesting take on it. That's his big contribution. He also writes a lot of short books that just plow through the story at amazing speed. And so if you want to read a story quickly, Moorcock is the guy for you. Yeah. So that's number 4. We're going to do 5 for this video, and then we'll do 5 in another video.
All right. Okay. Sounds good.
Because we like talking about these guys too much. We're going to run out of time. Who do we want to do next?
Let's see. Broken Empire.
Oh, Marc Lowrance?
Marc Lowrance. So, Marc Lowrance is another more modern fantasy writer. I first discovered him reading the Broken Empire trilogy, which follows the exploits of young Prince Jorg, the Prince of Thorns,
Well, I was read as York. I have a
Yeah.
I have a video review of it up on my YouTube channel. I wasn't a fan of the book.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. But anyway,
So what I loved about it is it's the world is post-apocalyptic fantasy. So the world is imagine the world that we currently live in, but a nuclear apocalypse has happened and humanity has just evolved back to the point of castles in the medieval period, but there's remnants of supercomputers and the Hadron Super Collider and these technologies, and the people basically think that they're spirits and ghosts because there's these AIs that still interact with them, and then basically God, the series is so cool, and what I found that kind of turned me off from the series initially was the character's 14. He doesn't act 14. He acts like...
Yeah, he's totally like Gary Stu.
Gary Stu?
He's a Gary Stu. He's just good at everything for no reason.
Yeah, he's really good at everything. He's a total badass, and it's the setting is what's so cool, and he has all these people around him who are really just afraid of him, and that's something that turned me off, was that it's like he's 14. I don't care if he's 6'8". He's 14, man. Like, no one is gonna have this much confidence, no matter who they are.
The place where I like really got switched off is when he's like an amazing lover. It's 14. He's like having sex and he's really good at it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah,
I don't know.
So the Mary Sue-ness of the character is it can be off-putting.
They kind of explain it with plot.
The reason that I liked it so much was really the setting. The setting was really great, and I just imagined the character was older than he was, because
he
helped me stay in the...
What I will say about Marc Lowrance is that I think he's really good at prose.
Yeah,
and I actually think he's really good at pushing story forward, and he's really good at kind of moving between, he'll do this thing where he'll like have these flashbacks that then inform, which is, it's a technique that a lot of people use, but he's pretty good at it. I do like his prose quite a bit, and he's able to throttle through action at a pretty good pace, without making you feel like you're not getting any description. And that's the sway of anything that you're writing, is that if you go too heavy into description, you're gonna possibly bore the reader, and if you have no description, then they're gonna feel like they're reading something a 5-year-old wrote.
Yeah.
That they're not gonna have an idea of what you're talking about.
Yeah, just make sure you're not much ado about nothing.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about 5 more on the next video, and I think for the next one we'll lead off with Robert Jordan, who with Cautionary Tales. He's great, and he has some amazing books, and then there's also some weak points to Robert Jordan, with what we just talked about. Yeah. Is that the prose is great, but if you're not describing something of importance, then you're confusing the reader.
Yeah.
Because if I stop and I'm like, if I describe a tower and I describe like all its mini turrets and facets and the way its parapets look, and then the character walks past it and never sees it again, why did I do that?
Yeah,
why didn't I just say he walked past the tower with parapets?
Yeah.
It's like, so that's what Marc Lowrance does, is he'll give you the descriptions that you need, and a lot of times it's like, oh, he's at the castle, and he doesn't need to describe a castle.
Yeah.
He doesn't sit there and be like, the castle will look like this. It's a castle.
Yeah. Well, what's cool though is that he'll describe a castle. He'll say this was a castle, and then he'll describe a skyscraper.
Yes.
And that's what's so cool.
Yeah, to the characters, it's a castle because they don't really know what they're looking at. It's a remnants of like a skyscraper that's been turned into a fortress.
Yes. So that's one of the things that I really love. So that's going to be it for today. I think I'm gonna be running a promo this week on Cloaked in Darkness. It's going to be free. Check that out. It's a really fun short read that's going to lead into a much bigger universe.
I think it'll be running free tomorrow. I'm also going to run a promo, Prophet of the Godseed, my hard sci-fi novel from last year. I'm going to have that running free for a couple days as well. So please grab that and check it out. And we'll see you guys next time. You can find me at dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com.
You can find me at matthewjwellman.com.
Late.